when the opportunity to talk about Hebrew Revelation came up, the first thing my mind went to, for some odd reason, was chapter 6, and here we are tonight. So, Michael, I think it's your turn to read, correct?
Yours.
It is my turn. Okay. All right, well then, let's get to it. I get to introduce it and read the first chapter. So here you go. These are the confidential counsels. Chapter 6, verse 1. Then I saw that the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard the four living creatures say, like one voice, "Come and see." Then I saw a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow in his hand, and a crown was given to him, and he went to overcome, and he overcame. And when the second seal was opened, I heard the second living creature say, "Come and see." Then another red horse went out, and he who sat on it was given to take away the shalom from the earth, and a great sword was given to him. And when he opened the third seal, the third living creature said, "Come and see." Then I saw a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A measure of wheat for 2 coins, and 3 measures of barley for 2 coins, and to the oil and the wine do not damage." And when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living creature say, "Come and see." Then I saw a speckled and strong horse, and he who sat on it, his name was the Messenger of Death, and Ha-Gehinnom followed after him. And authority was given to him to put to death a fourth part on the earth, with the sword and with famine and with death, and by animals of the earth. And when he opened the fifth, I saw under the temple the persons which were killed because of the set-apartness of Yahuah, and because of the testimony which they had. And they cried out with a great voice and said, "Set apart and faithful Adon, until when will you judge without avenging our blood from those who dwell on the earth?" And to every one of them were given white garments, and it was said to them that they should rest yet a little time. And I saw that he opened the sixth, and there was an earthquake, and the sun was black, and the moon was red like blood. And all their hosts fell down like a leaf falls from a vine, and like the withering of a fig tree. And all the mountains and hills were shaken away from their place. And the kings of the earth, and the rulers and the rich ones, and the officers and the slaves and the free ones, hid in narrow caves and holes in the ground. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, "Fall on us, and hide us because of the appearance of him who sits on the throne, and because of the fury of the Lamb. For the day of his burning anger has come, and who is able to stand before him?" All right, over to you, Rob.
Okay, I will start with the Four Horsemen here, and I got 3 slides on the Four Horsemen. So I'll start with them. Firstly, here that it talks about a red, a speckled, and black and white horse. And what I wanted to first start with is in Zechariah. There's also another comparison with these horses. And it says in Zechariah that the red, speckled, and white patrol the earth when commanded. And we see that example in Zechariah 1, 8 through 10. And there's 4 horse chariots, which are referenced to be the 4 spirits of heaven, sent out to patrol the earth. Those who are going to the land of the north have appeased my wrath in the land of the north. And that's from Zechariah 6, 1 through 8. So that these 4 chariots, these 4 horses, spirits going throughout the earth, being sent out to those places. So I'll start with the white horse and go through these, and I'll also bring in Ezekiel too on this. So the white horse we see in the representation, it's all about symbology with what's being said. As we read many times, Yeshua always is speaking some of these things in parables, and we have to interpret them either ourselves or he'll give us the keys in doing so. So the white horse, the bow in rider's hand, and crown to overcome is what's mentioned. And this authority to conquer and overcome is given to the white horse. And according to Zechariah, this white horse goes to the north. The bow, if you look that word up in Greek, it's used only once. And it's derived from another word, G5088, to produce. So that bow, that instrument, produces, and he has a crown to overcome and conquer. So I guess that's where they tied in the bow itself. It produces arrows, a quiver, in that form. I couldn't quite grasp. There was not enough context to see what it was meant by this derision from the word produce. The crown or wreath that's mentioned here, the crown to overcome, also can mean wreath, is a symbol of honor, and we can read that in 2nd Ezra 16:13-14. I found it interesting that it mentions wreath, and we see in a lot of the history this use of a wreath being worn on heads. So I thought that was interesting. Now, the red horse, the rider has a great sword and takes shalom away from the earth. And in Zechariah it says this rider goes to all the earth. So this rider's going everywhere, not just to north like the white horse. Taking shalom away from the earth. And in Matthew, we see Matthew 10:13, if the house is worthy, see that your blessing of shalom comes upon it. But if it is not worthy, take back your blessing of shalom. John 16:33, these things I have spoken to you, so that in me you may have shalom, for you will have distress in the world, but trust in me, I have overcome the world. We just read that. And so we see that the red horse is taking the shalom away from the world. And Yeshua just says, you may have shalom if you trust in him. So that's key. Now the black horse, as we read, that rider has a pair of scales in hand, and that rider also, according to Zechariah, goes to the north with the white horse, or after the white horse. No, matter of fact, the black horse goes first, and then the white horse follows. Here it says, the measure of wheat for 2 faces and 3 measures of barley for 2 faces. And that translation of 2 faces we see as coin, because that's normally what you would see on a coin. Each side has a face. So that's the way. If that means anything else to anybody, let me know. But that's what I got from that description of the coin and faces. And do not damage the oil and wine. So the denarius used back in the day is also a penny of a silver coin, and it is related, at least from what I understand, as a day's wage for the measures of barley and wheat that's mentioned here. And then the scales figuratively, obviously, literally it's scales, the word for scales, but figuratively that word means joined by yoke. So the hand that's holding the scales, figuratively that word is hand, but I mean, literally the word is hand. Figuratively that word is power. So there's power joining and yoking that is in his hands. So I think that was interesting in seeing that. And then I will move on to the 4th horse. And let me drop that down in here. And give me a second. Okay, so now the 4th horse we see is a speckled, strong horse, and the rider's name is the messenger of death. Now that rider in Zechariah is going to the south. So we see the white and black, the black and white horse go north. The red horse goes throughout the whole earth, and then the speckled strong horse is now going to the south. And that rider is the messenger of death. So we read in here is that the valley of Hinnom followed after him to put to death 25% of the earth with sword, famine, and death by wild animals. And we see a similar in Ezekiel 5 there's a similarity that is the judgments of Israel for rejecting the Father's ordinances and not walking in his statutes, doing abominations, that sword, famine, and death comes upon them as a judgment. So I think that's very telling in tying into this particular messenger of death writing, and how Ezekiel speaks of this exact judgment of sword, famine, and death. And the reason for it is because of Israel rejecting his ordinances and his statutes, not walking in them, doing abominations. So there's four severe judgments against Jerusalem that I just mentioned, and that's in Ezekiel 5, but also in Ezekiel 14, 12 through 23. And the famine on human and animal life, vicious animals destroying, the sword and plagues will come and eliminate man and animals. So we see in Ezekiel 14, it gives more detail, specifically what that is. They will not be able to save their family, only themselves, due to their righteousness. So in this particular part in Ezekiel, it's mentioning that the families of the righteous are not going to be saved. It's only the true righteous that will be saved. The rest they just will not make it. Survivors coming out, both son and daughter. So at this judgment, at this time of this time that's mentioned in Ezekiel, it's talking about survivors that do come out, both sons and daughters. They are going to come out to you, and then they will comfort you when you see their conduct and actions. So those will be comforted in seeing their conduct and actions. What does that mean? Their conduct and actions. It's very telling. See, a lot. It's based on our actions, their actions, the humility, the love, and producing the fruit and walking in them. There's so much tied to righteousness and our actions if they're genuine and true. Let me finish it off with, for you will know that I have not done without reason whatever I did to it, declares Adonai Yahuah. So at the end, after all this destruction, after all the judgment that's being put out and put upon all, it's not until the end is when we will see what he did and why. So that's pretty powerful and scary, because the majority of people don't know. They live in the fear when these judgments will come upon them all. So that's the scary part. And I got one more for the Four Horsemen, and that is, all right, give me a second so I can drop it. All right, this one here is regarding the fourth horse. And this is on Jeremiah. In the book of Jeremiah, he speaks of this fourth horse also. They're mentioned. And specifically on this horse, it says, Yahuah's heart will not be with his people. They've forsaken him. They did not repent of their ways. Here we go. Yah is tired of relenting and holding off and waiting, and they just would not repent of their ways. So he brings death, sword, famine, and captivity. So once again, judgments upon his people. And we see this tied directly into very, very similar to Revelation as we're reading here. And then there's four dooms declared in Jeremiah: sword to kill, dogs to drag away, birds of the sky to devour and destroy, and animals of the earth to devour and destroy. And we see all of these tied in, just more detail regarding to what we just read on the Four Horsemen, and especially regarding the messenger of death on that horse. So with the Four Horsemen, I'm going to stop there, and I'll pass it over to Michael and until we circle back around. Michael?
Yes, sir. Sounds good. I'm going to take a different take on these horsemen, and it's Yah's timing, because Cher is in the house. And about a year or so ago, a little bit under a year, we were all at Passover at Noel's house. And I remember talking to Cher about the Mazaroth in the sky. So I'm not saying this is 100% correct, but I'm going to link these four horsemen to possibly that. And a little shout out to our Discord page of the Maseroth. Please go dust that off. It's lonely, and there's some good stuff in there. But okay, so now that I've set that, let's see. So, and actually, this is going to be first too. I'm going to be dropping pictures, so you guys are in for a treat here. So, let's see. The first of 7 seals. So. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. And let me just drop in Sagittarius. So is this possible that it's a white bow, the archer? You know, there it is. The next one is second beast, and there went on another horse, and that was red, and the power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. So my next thing would be, is it possible it's Orion? See, it's the great and mighty hunter of the sky. You know, third horse, I heard a third beast say, come and see, and I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. Which one has the balances? I'm only going to do 4, so I'm not going through every one. But maybe it's Libra. You know, Libra is known as the scales in this constellations. And then finally, the fourth horse. Let's see, which one do I have here? And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and Hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And finally, I'll just stop here. Could it be the Pegasus constellation of the white horse? I don't know if these are true or not, but I was looking for a different take on it, and I thought that was interesting that these seals could just possibly be the Maseroth in the heavens. So that's what I got for there. I'll stop that because I ran into some issues with the 5th seal and linking it to a constellation. Number 2, I'm going to read both. So let's do that. The Greek. And I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him. And he went forth conquering and to conquer. And in the Hebrew, then I saw a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow in his hand, and a crown was given to him, and he went to overcome, and he overcame. And just point out the differences, you know, conquering and to conquer, and he overcame. I want to make note that conquer was omitted from the Codex Sinaiticus. So it's very possible that the Hebrew was more correct if it was part of the original text. Maybe it's always been overcome. And the later Greek wrote in conquer. I don't think this is Yeshua. So a lot of people will link him to this one. And the reason is because Yeshua in Revelation or Confidential Counsels 19:12 has many crowns, not just one, and does not carry a bow, Revelation 19:15. And the word for crown, Stephanos, a lot of conspiracy theories based around that, and is different from the many crowns, diadema, of Yeshua in Revelation. So that's just my dog in the race that this is not talking about Yeshua. Number 8, I'm going to read both again. Let's see, number 8. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and Hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And in Hebrew, then I saw a speckled and strong horse, and he who sat on it, his name was the messenger of death, and Ha-Gehinnom followed after him, and the authority was given to him to put to death a fourth part of the earth, with the sword and the famine, and with death, and by the animals of the earth. Again, I'm just highlighting the differences. Pale versus speckled and strong. The messenger of the death is different. And Ha-Hinnom, I think I totally butchered that, was different than the Greek. But it is mentioning animals being killed. So I wanted to read 2 cross references on that. 2 Peter 2:12. But these, like unreasoning animals, born as creatures of instinct to be captured and killed, using abusive speech where they have no knowledge, will in the destruction of those creatures also be destroyed. And then Exodus 9:3, I thought this was awesome. Behold, the hand of the Lord will come with a very severe plague on your livestock, which are in the field, on the horses and the donkeys and the camels and the herds and the flocks. And I think, let's see, 8. A lot of people say that this is the plague, in one of the seals. So I thought that was a great parallel there. And then finally, and then I'll hand it off to Noel. Number 9. I'm reading both. Let's see. And when he had opened the 5th seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. That's the Greek. In the Hebrew, and when he opened the 5th, I saw under the temple of the persons which were killed because of the set apartness of Yahuah, and because of the testimony which they had. Again, the differences are pretty cool. Again, altars of the souls is the temple. Word of God is set apartness of Yahuah. That's awesome. But it struck something with me. I think this is similar to Genesis 4:10, which says, "Then he said, 'What have you done? The voice of your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground.'" So I thought that was a cool cross-reference to end it. I have plenty more on the second half, but I'll hand it off to Noel now.
I would certainly agree with you, Michael, that I do not see Yahusha in these writers. And I'm curious on the Zodiac, because that's the first that I have thought about that. And that is truly fascinating, especially with the idea of the sword coming out of Yahusha's mouth, the lightning, from the east, all those kind of things going on, a lot of stuff in the sky. Maybe you can just answer this as a yes or no. Did you see those in order within the Zodiac, or are they kind of out of order?
Those were in order. Oh,
They were.
The Zodiac. That I think they might have been out of order.
Okay, so it wasn't like one hitting in the next and the next. Okay, I was just kind of curious.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm really excited to be talking about this chapter tonight, particularly after my talk on Thursday when I talked about the year 66 to 70 AD and the generation that Yahusha talked about in Matthew 24, which I personally feel like I made a very good case that everything that was leading up to Yahusha's glorious appearing was going to happen in that generation, that he was indeed coming back for his disciples, as time and time and time again he promised that he would come back for them and not somebody else. The language is very specific. I'm coming back for you, right? Some of you will not taste death before all these things happen. So what I'm going to do tonight is look at Matthew 24. We're going to revisit that, and I'm going to show you. I actually came upon this discovery a couple of years ago now, and it was kind of by accident. I don't know why I did it. I didn't read anybody else who did this. I was going through this chapter, and I was finding it a little confusing and going like, what does this all mean? And then for whatever reason, I just picked up Matthew 24 and I started sliding the verses over on top of each other, and it fit like a glove. I mean, I was like, oh my, like in order, perfect order, they fit. All right. So first we're going to look at Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 2. Now keep in mind, all of these seals are leading up to the final appearing of Yahusha, right? And Matthew 24 has the same thing. Everything is leading up to his appearing. And he always says that all these things will happen in this generation, and some of you will not taste death. Now, I need to put out there, because the first skepticism everyone says is, really, no, you think you think all these people died, and all these animals and the sea and all this stuff, and the stars fell. Well, I wasn't there. I wasn't there in the first century. All I know is what Scripture is pointing to. All right. So the first thing we see in Revelation 6, verses 1 through 2, is the first rider, and let me pull this up here in the Hebrew, and it says, "Then I saw the Lamb open one of the seals, and I heard the 4 living creatures say, like one voice, 'Come and see.' And then I saw a white horse, and he who sat on it had a bow in his hand, and a crown was given to him, and he went to overcome, and he overcame." So we're going to look at, let's rely on BibleBot tonight, and hopefully BibleBot does not let me down. Usually she does not. Matthew 24, verses 3 through 5. "And he sat on the Mount of Olives. The taught ones came to him separately, saying, 'Say to us, when shall this be, and what is the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?' And he said to them, 'Take heed that no one leads you astray. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they shall lead you away.'" All right? So now you guys are going to say, well, this might not sell you right away, but you're going to see that they overlay each other really well. The first seal, I believe, is religious deception. And The first rider, the rider with the bow, he is a deceiver. In fact, many commentators say that this is the Antichrist. All right. Now, that's more up for debate. I've seen within the Torah community, and they will debate this. But he's going out to conquer people, and he's going out to deceive people. And I'm of the opinion that there was a very big deceiver which showed up within the 40-year span between Yahushua's resurrection and the temple being destroyed, who went and deceived many people. And we see this in the language used within Revelation, James, Peter, so on and so forth. We're talking about this Balaam character, this Jezebel going through the camps, right? Pulling out many people, deceiving them. All right, so that's the first. The next seal is that of war, Revelation 6:4. Now I'm going to be reading from I'll read from the Hebrew here. Then another red horse went out, and he who sat on it was given to take away the shalom from the earth, and a great sword was given to him. All right, so now let's read the exact next verse in Matthew 24, which is, so we're going from spiritual religious deception to war. And you shall begin to hear of fightings and reports of fightings. See that you are not troubled, for these have to take place, but the end is not yet. All right, that's the second seal, is war. The next one we see is the third seal is famine. All right, so let me read from, I got to pull up all these different screens, guys. All right, verses 5 through 8. And when he opened the third seal, the third living creature said, "Come and see." Then I saw a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hands. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A measure of wheat for 2 coins, and 3 measures of barley for 2 coins, and the oil and the wine do not damage." All right, so that's the third seal. So let's turn to the next verse in Matthew. It's amazing. They fit it right over each other like a glove. Matthew 24, verse 7, which says, "For nation shall rise against nation, and reign against reign, and there shall be scarcities of food, and deadly diseases, and earthquakes in places." Right, we get to the, let's see, the fourth seal. Wait, did I skip over? Did I skip over a seal? I have, let me see what Revelation 6, 9 through 11 says. 6, 9 through 11. And we opened the fifth seal, so maybe I skipped over the fourth. Interesting. I'll have to go back and look at my notes. Whatever. But let's go read this anyways, because this is what's in front of me. And when he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the temple the persons which were killed because of the set-apartness of Yahuah and because of the testimony which they had. And they cried out with a great voice and said, "Set apart and faithful Adon, until when will you judge without avenging our blood and from those who dwell on the earth?" And you guys know this story. So let's go to BibleBot, Matthew 24, verses 9 through 12. And it says, then they shall deliver you up to affliction and kill you. Kind of like the people under the throne. "And you shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many shall stumble, and they shall deliver up one another, and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise up and lead many astray. And because of the increase in lawlessness, the love of many shall grow cold." So here we see the people, as I went over on Thursday night, Sheol has been emptied by this point. Sheol was emptied at the time of the crucifixion and resurrection of Yahushua. And according to 2nd Ezra, once it was emptied out, it would not be filled again with the set apart, the righteous. So my theory on this is that we see here under the throne, they're in a kind of holding cell. Like they're not allowed into paradise yet. And this has been long commented on by different people, and we could debate why all we want, but for some reason they were in a holding cell. They were not released yet, and these are the people being delivered up. And then we go to the sixth seal. So Revelation 6, 12 through 13 says, "And I saw that he opened the sixth seal, and there was an earthquake, and the sun was black, and the moon was red like blood, and all their hosts fell down like a leaf falls from a vine, and like the withering of a fig tree. And all the mountains and hills were shaken away from their place." All right. Now we're going to go to Matthew 24, verse 29. And it says, "And immediately after the distress of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give its light, and the stars shall fall from the heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken." So there you go. I feel that again, see, everyone reads Revelation 6 and they think this is a future event, and I'm saying it happened. And one of the things that are helpful in this is that Yochanan is being taken up to the courtroom in heaven. All right. This courtroom is probably going on right now. I don't know what time zone they're in. They're probably not on Florida or South Carolina time zone. They may very well be awake, and they're doing they're opening their seals. They're opening their books. You know, the Lamb is stepping up there, and Yahuah sitting on the Most High, sitting on his throne. The elders are out there, and they're going about their court business. And on any given day, they're opening books, they're opening seals, all sorts of stuff. They're declaring things. And while this is obviously a big event that Yochanan is seeing, it's big enough that, you know, he's writing it down. What he is doing is he's recording the heavenly court. And we make it out like this is a once in history event. And Noel, you're taking away our hope. There goes Noel again. He's taking away our hope. You know, because, and I'm just telling you that, like, seals are open all the time up there. All right. And Yahuah, the Most High, is always in control. He's got the books. He's got the people who can open it. He makes it happen. So I am passing it back to Rob.
Okay. Great tie-in with Matthew 24. I like that. And same with Michael on the constellation and stars. Good tie-in, because I wonder, as I commented, Michael, on the tying in these stars with these horses. Obviously, there's more than one star. It's several of them, and it makes you think that this particular horseman has an entourage, as Parley Hart said, an entourage coming along with them in getting their work done. And I believe it was in Zechariah, I think it was in Ezekiel, where it mentions chariot. So obviously a chariot is, it can be pulled by one horse, but usually there's multiple in that sense. So that could be referencing that is, it's representing more than one horse. So I thought that was great stuff to share. Now I'm going to talk on the fifth and sixth seal overview, and what I have is regarding the souls under the throne, under the temple. These are the set apart ones who were killed for their testimony, as in tablets of testimony, or ark of testimony, or tabernacle of testimony. That word is the same word used when you are referencing the tablets of testimony, the ark, and the tabernacle of testimony. So they were killed for their testimony. And when you review the context used in the tablet of, ark of, and tabernacle of, it's always referencing the instructions, the words written of obedience. So once again, they were killed for their testimony. They were walking out the truth, their faith, and the set apart ones were killed for that. We also see that these souls under the temple were wearing white robes, or robes of light. That word there also does mention light in G3022. For he has clothed me with garments of salvation. He has wrapped me with a robe of righteousness. And that is in Isaiah 61:10. So we know these robes are of righteousness. We've read that many times on these white robes and the representation of righteousness, garments of salvation. So they're all representative of that clean pureness and righteousness that these souls under the temple are wearing. And as Noel referenced, that these saints are there, up there under the temple, as Sheol has been released, etc. And then the sixth seal, we see here a great earthquake and multiple things happening when this seal is opened. The sun became black, and a third of it darkened. And what I wanted to point out in Revelation 8:12, it mentions a very similar event, which can be taken as the same event, just another spin on it. And that's where it gives a detail that it wasn't just black, but it was a third of it darkened. And then in Joel chapter 3 and chapter 2, multiple places, as referenced here, 3, 14 and 15, 2, 10 and 31, his vision, what he saw was the sun and moon have become dark, and the stars have lost their brightness. Very interesting. Then the next part, during this great earthquake, it mentions the moon becomes as blood. And then also in chapter 8, verse 12, we see that 1/3 of the moon is darkened. And then in Ezekiel, he references a very similar event. And in that verse it says, 32:7, and when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. Says the word of Yahuah for the coming judgment on Mitzrayim. So once again, it's referencing to judgment. Now the stars, same way, chapter 8, verse 12, and chapter 12, verse 4. 1/3 of them fell to the earth, like leaves fall from a vine. Isaiah 34:4 reference. And all the heavenly lights will wear away, and the sky will be rolled up like a scroll, and its lights will also wither away as a leaf withers from the vine, or as one withers from the fig tree. So we see these tie-ins and references with Isaiah talking about this type of event, similar fashion of the stars falling and withering away, falling down. And then lastly, the heavens are separated, and we see that in Isaiah 34:4, with the scroll being rolled up. Every mountain and island from out of its places will be shaken and or moved, and the people hide in anger of the land. So that's my overview and tie-ins with the other visions that are spoken about out there. So Michael, I will pass it over to you for further.
All right. I just have 4 comments left on this Confidential Counsels, Chapter 6. I'm going to be speaking on 2 of these 4. I'm going to be speaking on, I want to show that there's possible 2 separate events, and it might help Noel with his studies within this chapter. So I'm going to read number 12 first in the Hebrew. And I saw that he opened the 6, and there was an earthquake, and the sun was black, and the moon was red like blood. This reminds me of Joel 2:30-31. I will display wonders in the sky and on the earth, blood, fire, columns of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. Just want to highlight blood moon. Acts 2:19-20. And I will display wonders in the sky above and signs on the earth, blood, fire, and vapor of smoke. The sun will be turned into darkness and the moon into blood. Again, blood moon. Noel already read it, but Matthew 24:29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from heaven. That's after the trib. Is that a blood moon? I don't think so. I'm trying to say that something happens before the tribulation ends, at his coming, quote unquote. When, if you're a post-mill, you would say that, after the tribulation, can't you just see it? It's right there in Matthew 24. But these other 2 passages are saying there's blood moon before that. So that's just my first example of it. There's possibly two events there. The second one would be number 15. I'm going to read the Hebrew. Let's see. And the kings of the earth and the rulers and the rich ones and the officers and the slaves and the free ones hid in narrow caves and holes in the ground. Okay, so I want to make the case that similar to blood moons, this appears to be separate events. And so Isaiah 2:19-21. People will go into caves of the rocks and into the holes in the ground, away from the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty. On that day, people will throw away to the moles and to the bats their idols of silver and their idols of gold, which they made for themselves to worship, in order to get in the clefts of the rocks and the crannies of the cliffs before the terror of the Lord and the splendor of his majesty, when he arrives to terrify the earth. Okay, so that seems like a parallel, right? They're hiding in the caves of the rocks. So then we go Revelation 17:14. This is supposedly at his coming, These will wage war against the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, because he is the Lord of Lords and the King of Kings. And those who are with him are called the chosen and faithful. I thought they're scared and hiding in the rocks, in the caves. How are they waiting for his return and ready to fight him? That's two separate events. It appears he comes like a thief in the night at the beginning, like he tells most of his disciples. And that's where they go hide in the caves. They were caught, unsuspecting. And then you read on later in Revelation, they're waiting for him to wage war against him at his coming, quote unquote. So those are two examples of possibly two separate events. I'll just go back to some regular notes here. Number 13, I'm going to read both. And the stars of heaven fell unto earth, even as a fig tree casteth her ultimate untimely figs, which she is shaken of a mighty wind. And in the Hebrew, and all their hosts fell down like a leaf falls from a vine, and like the withering of a fig tree. And we already talked about the Maseroth again, but the Greek, it literally says the stars of heaven will fall into the earth. It reminded me of Isaiah 34:4, and all the heavenly lights will wear away, and the sky will be rolled up like a scroll. Interesting, huh? Scroll has seals, and we're talking about the Maseroth. All its lights will also go wither away. What's the lights in the sky? We just talked about it. As a leaf withers from the vine, or as one withers from the fig tree. So again, this is just my case. Again, I'm not dogmatic on it, but that these are possibly talking about the heavenlies, the Maseroth in the sky. And then finally, and I'll hand it off to Noel, number 16. I'll read the Hebrew. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us because of the appearance of him who sits on the throne and because of the fury of the Lamb. And just a cross-reference to Luke 23:29, for behold, the days are coming when they will say, blessed are those who cannot bear, and the wombs that have not given birth, and the breasts that have not nursed. Then they will begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. For if they do these things when the tree is green, what will happen when it is dry? Just another somewhat of a cross-reference. But I hope you enjoyed that, and I'll hand it off to Noel.
I think you're spot on, Michael, that we are looking at two events, and I haven't been able to. That's one of the things I haven't been able to put my finger on quite yet. If you guys have been following what I've been trying to do over the last several months is problem solve. Right, we've got a lot of problems in front of us. If these events did happen, and if the millennial kingdom physically happened on this earth, then we need to be able to, we're kind of stuck in the rut of this doctrine that's been handed to us of this, these future events, and how do we look at it as a past event, right? I do believe that there are two things happening in Revelation, and that's something I still need to dig into. So that's all good. Let me just I finally found, I didn't have in front of me my notes on the fourth seal. So, and keep in mind, guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, they all go in order in Matthew 24. All right. So concise order. And that's the thing where it really fits like a glove. So because I didn't mention this earlier, it says, and when he opened the fourth seal, I heard the fourth living creature say, come and see. Then I saw a speckled and strong horse, and he who sat on it, his name was the messenger of death. And Gehenna followed after him, and authority was given to him to put to death a fourth part on the earth, with the sword, and with famine, and with death, and by animals of the earth. I'm going to make a quick comment on something that just occurred to me just now, after I show this verse in Matthew. I think this is Matthew 24:7. Come on, Bible bot, don't let me down. For nation shall rise against nation, and reign against reign, and there shall be no, I already read that one. Okay.
Maybe you're referencing verse 8.
Yeah, let me try it. Let me try that again. Matthew 24:8. And all these things, no, that's not it. Okay, whatever. It was there, guys. I just had it in my notes. Whatever. You just notes there. You guys can look it up, and they all fit over each other. I do want to make this comment, though. I had said, and I think I can make a strong case for this, that Sheol was emptied out of the righteous by this point. Okay, so, and we see that those who are handed over and persecuted and killed go to the throne. And I don't know how this really works out this is a whole nother study of trying to figure out how the spiritual works with the physical, as above, so below. Were these saints, these set apart, were they under the throne in heaven or under the throne in the actual temple on the earth, or both? I believe that they were under the temple on the earth, but it would be really interesting if there's something going on between both locations. But it says here that the messenger of death, that the Gehenna followed after him, right? No, it doesn't say Sheol, but it's interesting. Well, who's thrown into Gehenna, guys? Like, it's not the set apart. And so that's just kind of something to think about in that context, because obviously I would assume that in this context, the set apart are not taking part in these wars. They're not, they're not being affected necessarily death-wise by this messenger of death if he's taken them to Gehenna. So just worth your attention. Back to you, Rob.
Yeah, regarding the messenger of death, and whether you want to say death and hell was followed after him, or Gehenna, is that whatever was following him, and he had the authority to put death a fourth part of the earth. So there is a lot of obviously evil coming along with this messenger of death that's just going to be rampant along the earth with sword, famine, and death, etc. So, but I wanted to also comment on the mention of the white horse being an antichrist figure. I think that is very likely also. And I then wanted to also comment on the part Michael was mentioning in 16, and it said to the mountains and the rocks to fall on us, hide, because of the appearance of him who sat on the throne, because of the fury of the Lamb. I think that also it could be a separate event, and it could be referencing a certain peoples, or during the same event even. And while some are fighting against them, others are hiding and scared because they see things differently. So I'm up for either or on that. And I definitely, as we're going through this, I'm hoping that we can piece some of these things together or show the separateness of them. Because as we see in the other books of Ezekiel and Jeremiah, etc., that these events, the day of the Lord, are all described and very similar in many aspects, but there's also a few in it that are not. And it makes me wonder if some of these prophets, speaking of these judgments that come out or come forth, are mini resets. So that when one prophet's speaking of a specific event, that it happens at certain points in time, there's these events of some sort, some kind of famine, judgment, etc., on Yah's people, and somewhat of a reset, so to speak. But I'm without reading these prophets over again to fully stand behind that. I'm just speculating at this point without looking at ahead, because if it doesn't say and relate that Yeshua is coming in these, but more or less judgment's coming and stuff happening, then it could be a possibility. And with that possibility, we have these judgments happening to where there could be another reset, so to speak, at that time. Just a thought. And if you guys think of anything like that or about that, I'd like to hear your thoughts. With that, I am done with this chapter.
Yeah, I'm done as well. So Noel can finish this off, or we can take questions.
Round table it. All right, we'll open up the floor, and anybody who has, I'm sure you guys have plenty to say on this, so be sure to stand in line, kindergarten style, step up to the mic, and let us know what you guys think. Don't all rush up at once, though.
You know I have something to say, but I was going to wait.
Step on up. You got the mic.
Okay, so you mentioned about like an antichrist type figure, and the first thing that came to mind for me was Bar Kokhba. So he was the leader that led the a revolt. I think it's considered the longest revolt in the history of the Roman Empire, and he led a revolt and declared independence from the Roman Empire, and held on for 3.5 years, which kind of sound interesting, the number 3.5 years. And at the time when he was leading, most of the biggest rabbis, the most famous rabbis at the time, declared him King Messiah, and they believed that he was Messiah. And then, everything fell apart. So he came to my mind. Do you know who I'm talking about, Noel?
Yeah, you're talking about the Bar Kokhba revolt, correct?
Yes. So did you know that he was considered the Messiah at the time?
So that happened. It's interesting you bring that up, because now we're going to get a little wacky on the timeline, because that happened in the 2nd century. I think it was 132 AD in the whereabouts. I actually had to quickly look that up just to make sure I had the right date. Is that what you're thinking about?
Yes, because that's the only person that came to my mind from like someone that was considered and declared King Messiah during the Roman Empire.
So I actually saw an interesting old text that that was let me see here. I'm just looking this up real quick. Oh, Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian. I think it was it was Emperor Hadrian who went up against that. Now there was an interesting document that I saw that talked about how Hadrian destroyed the temple. And you're like, well, wait a second, that's really weird, because I thought it happened under, was it, the Flavians, 70 years earlier or something like that. And now Hadrian did some interesting things on Fort Antonia. I don't believe the Temple Mount is where Solomon, if we're going by the actual land of Israel here, that's clearly a Roman fort to me. And Hadrian apparently did some stuff there. But I have wondered, and this is just against speculation, and I think it's worth looking in, were those two wars the same event? I think it's worth considering and looking in.
Yeah, and I also read that he's the one that did the final destruction, because they were so pissed off, because, they never had such a revolt that held for 3.5 years from a relatively very small nation, but he was, when you read about Bar Kokhba, it's a very interesting story. He was a ruthless leader, and then really, like, the most famous rabbis believed in him. And then after all was said and done, and basically he's considered to bring the most horrible devastation on the nation of Israel is Bar Kokhba, because of his revolt, Adrian was ruthless once they defeated the Bar Kokhba. But anyway, so years and years later, the rabbis, this is just my speculation, okay? The rabbis were trying to recover from their embarrassment, okay? Because they impressed him. So then they started coming up with all kind of excuses, and finally, sometimes in the Middle Ages, they started coming up with a theory that the Old Testament was talking about two different messiahs: Messiah ben Joseph, Messiah ben Yosef, and Messiah ben David, and that Bar Kokhba was Messiah ben Yosef. So I don't even know if you've ever heard about this, Noel, but this is so interesting. And up to today, all the Orthodox rabbis are talking about two messiahs, and which actually kind of like fall in line with two coming of the, like, in a way they accepted the fact that there is a two coming of a messiah, but they were saying it's two different messiahs.
That's really interesting. So do they still hold to Kokba as a potential messiah, or is he done with now?
He is done. No, they claim that because they were trying to save their faces, they claim that he was indeed a messiah, but he was the Messiah ben Joseph, okay, and ben Yosef. Joseph, from the 12 tribes. So
now, here's what I think, and this is not a "Thus saith the Lord." This is a "Thus thinketh Noel." But so we saw on Thursday night. Anyone who tuned in saw that Josephus, in my opinion, was clearly working for Rome. He was under Rome's.
Yes.
So you see here that you have some Jews who were teaming up with Rome to destroy Jerusalem. Well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So it is my opinion that the Pharisees funded the rebellion in order to destroy the temple. Again, I will say it is my opinion that the Pharisees hated the temple and that they did not want the temple. The reason being is that they wanted their oral law. They wanted to push through their Talmud. The problem, again, is that the Sanhedrin was put in place. As long as there was a temple, there was a Sanhedrin. This is why I believe, again, that they are purposely eschewing the narrative, because that when you have the Dome of the Rock, on Fort Antonia, I believe that the Zionists know. When I say Zionists, I'm talking about the people up on top. They know
controllers.
The controllers. They know where Solomon's temple truly was, and it was not on Fort Antonia. And they have created this entire crisis because they actually don't want a temple, at least not yet. And so, as we know, Judaism comes from the Pharisee tradition, rabbinical Judaism. And so I have read enough evidence for me to speculate and perhaps conclude, at least until I could be proven wrong, that the Pharisees were actually funding a war to destroy. I mean, this is how evil this whole thing was, but actually destroy the temple, because then they actually got control from the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin don't hold the control anymore. They have the Babylonian Talmud in their control. Now we go from like 2 or 3 laws for Sabbath up to, like, I don't know what it is, 1,000, 1,300 laws just for Sabbath. I mean, just
whatever.
Oh, is it? Yeah, 5,000. Wow. Okay. And it's unbelievable, right? So they don't want to hand up that control anytime soon, I don't believe. And that's why they just keep pushing this off and off and off and keep creating, look, another fist fight broke out on top of the Temple Mount. Guess we got to delay the temple another decade now, So
it's very interesting what you just suggested, because just recently I read that they started doing archaeological digs outside of, like, kind of like on a different location, but outside where is the old city, okay? And they are saying that this is where the real city of David was located. And so maybe they are getting ready to build a temple. So now they are starting to say that it's that the city of David, David, is actually not inside the walls.
Yeah. They've found some really interesting things over there recently, and they had the name of I guess Yahuah, I guess, or I don't know what the name was exactly, over the gate there, which, over what I call Fort Antonia, and people are saying that's proof it was a temple. I say far from it. But then they've also claimed to have found the city of Shalom there, or the city of Melchizedek. It is a pretty cool little temple they found there. I guess the inner biblical nerd in me got excited about that, even though I'm highly questioning whether this is the Holy Land. But I thought that's pretty cool. So Yeah, but I definitely do not believe that Fort Antonia was the location of the temple. I think it was very close to Fort Antonia, as the First Maccabees documents that it looked down upon it, and that there was a bridge going down to it. But I do not believe that that wall, anything within that wall, was it. So that's just my personal opinion.
And I think that you might be right, because now they are starting to discover things in different locations.
Well, think about this. Okay, the 1967 war. I don't remember the guy leading the Israeli army. I have a whole article on it. I talk about him. What was the first thing they did when they came into Jerusalem on the first day? They marched in, they went up to the Temple Mount, and then they handed over to the Palestinian Authority. On the first day, they just said, "Here you go. We just conquered it, but we're going to give it back to you." And to me, it doesn't look like they really. I mean, they had it in their grasp. There was no threat of a nuclear annihilation ever. They gave it over, and then we hear all these stories. And I used to fall for this stuff. I used to think, "Oh, this is so terrible." And the Palestinians, you hear these quotes about how they're digging down there and they're destroying it. And there's like this whole this garbage heap where they're throwing out Second Era, or Second Temple era artifacts out there. And I'm just like, if really am I to believe that Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, which I believe is running the world, I believe that
yes, I agree with you.
Zionism is a pet project of Rome, just as Islam is, and the Roman Catholic Church could go in there and say, Palestinians, please don't destroy our Second Temple era, artifacts. Those belong in a museum. Like they have full control over this, and I just don't accept that whole narrative. Everything that's happening over there, I don't accept it. I just think that it's all for show. So, does anybody else? If you had anything else, but does anyone else have any thoughts on what we've gone over tonight, Revelation 6? I don't want to hog the roundtable discussion. My apologies.
I do. Not so much a question, or more like a historical background, because it's like, okay, this maybe is, I'll say it, my ignorance or lack of knowledge. But once again, who is John? Because I think people like myself sometimes confuse the John that we're referring to as the author of these books in the New Testament is sometimes maybe John the Baptist, but it's not. It's John, who is one of the 12 apostles. And could you speak to that? Because sometimes we have these different names, like even in the regular Bible, James known as, this, they've had two names or so. So could you clarify to us who is John?
Yochanan, or John would be Yochanan, and he's one of the sons of Tunda. And the John the Baptist, or Yochanan the baptizer, was beheaded for partly for criticizing Herod taking his brother's wife while his brother still lived. And then it's one of the only two birthdays recorded in Scripture, to my knowledge, where heads will roll on a birthday in the Bible. And the other one belongs to Pharaoh beheading the chief baker, or I guess hanging the chief baker. But John the Baptist lost his head during Yahushua's ministry. So yes, we are talking about one of the 12, the same author who wrote the Gospel of John, as well as 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. Anybody else?
No, have you heard the theory? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, were you wondering in regards to the scholarly opinion that Revelation was scribed by John's disciple, also named John? Is that what your question was referring to?
Was that Mike's question? I don't know. Was that your question, Mike?
No, but I've actually heard that before. What he said.
I would think that that's just the attempt to keep pushing Revelation further out and further away from 70 AD to completely disjoint, separate, the two. And I pointed out that on Thursday night that everybody assumes that John is an old man We see painting and artwork. He's always an old man. But why? It doesn't say that in the text. It doesn't say he's an old man. We believe it because we've been told it so much in order to, the sleight of hand to make it look like they don't want us to associate that book with being written before 70 AD. And as I've pointedly stated time and time again, that one of the biggest prophecies, that the other biggest prophecy aside from Yahushua prophesying that he would, the sign of Jonah, that he would rise again, destroy this temple, and he would rise again, was that the temple would be destroyed. And that all the New Testament was written with that lingering. Like nobody said, aha, it happened, just like he said. Like they put that in there, like he said that, and it would happen in this generation, and it wasn't fulfilled. And so that's one of the many reasons that I believe Revelation was written before the temple was destroyed. That was still lingering.
So as an historical, not just as a John's vision, but also as an historical narrative, as you've clearly shared this before, they would have put that in there. So this is why, as you're saying, this was written before 70 AD.
Yeah, whenever you see prophecies fulfilled, it would be like, not whenever, but many times they would say, and thus fulfilled such and such prophecy. They would, and he said this to fulfill the writings of such and such. Yeah.
I've got a question. You guys are talking about the Pharisees, and I've often wondered. I just never looked it up. The Levitical priesthood or the Kohen, did they? Is it like evolve into the Pharisees, or how the Sanhedrin, or how did it go from the Levitical to what was in the Messiah's time?
Robert, Michael, you guys want to answer that? No, I guess it'll be just me. Oh, Rob.
No, I have not personally followed the whole trail, but there, I can't recall if there was any type of hijacking on it, or what specific, if there was any bloodline that trailed that to either. So I can't speak to that. It's not something I studied regarding the Pharisees.
Okay, here's my understanding is that the Pharisees were not the dominant power of Yahushua's ministry. The Sanhedrin still were. Now, this would be a whole different study, and I don't have the notes in front of me, so I don't feel comfortable talking about this too much. But the temple controllers were not, I don't believe, the Yahudim. And the switcheroo happens with the Maccabean revolt, and again, that's a whole different discussion. But Yahushua is calling them multiple times the sons of Hasatan. Now, I know that people will say, "Oh, it's kind of like figurative, like you're either like the seed of Yah, or the seed of Satan," which is true to a degree. But I kind of really speculate that these were literally, there was a switcheroo that happened, and those were not the Yahudim. And this is some of what we hear in Revelation. When Yahushua's writing this and saying those who say they are of the Jews, but they're actually the synagogue or the congregation of Hasatan, they're the ones going to be handing you over. Well, who were the people handing them over? The temple controllers. People were afraid to come out about Messiah, that Yahushua was Messiah, because they wanted to stay in the temple with the controllers. We saw that with the parents of the blind person. We saw that with Nicodemus and others. They were all afraid to come out. And from my perspective, I'm going like, why? Like, I mean, I would want to be kicked out and be in the good company of Yahushua and his disciples. But so the Sanhedrin were still in control, and this goes back. Now, keep in mind who's in control today. Well, Rabbinical Judaism, right? And Rabbinical, you could look this up on Wikipedia. Rabbinical Judaism finds its roots in the Pharisees. The Talmud comes out of the oral tradition, and one of the ways they will say that the oral tradition goes all the way back to Moshe, that Moses and Yahushua or Joshua, they were given a written law that was for the people and an oral law that was for their kind of their mystery schools for the, the elite to be passed down. The problem I have with that is that you get into right in the times leading up to the Babylonian captivity, and you see that the Torah was completely lost. And you're like, well, wait a second. If they were so negligent with the written law that they actually lost it, and they didn't even have it anymore in their possession, and you had to, have people going digging it up out of the ground, and then finally you get to Ezra, and he's like supernaturally transcribing it from the Most High, all the scripture, because it was all gone. And then he read it in front of the people for the first time, and they're all weeping because they hadn't heard it, like old men hadn't heard it in their lifetime. You're like, well, how did they keep the oral law going too? Like, that doesn't, But anyways, so yeah, hopefully that explains that. And that's where I do believe that there was an attempt on the Pharisees' part to rid the control of the temple away from the Sanhedrin. And to do it, they actually, destroyed it. They were that. I believe that they were that evil and wicked. But again, that's just me. Go ahead.
No, I just want to share a thought about you mentioned about the oral Torah, which I'm completely with you. That was the biggest issue that I had from my childhood, because it just didn't make sense to me. But I want to go back to Yeshua, and I mean, I think one of the biggest fight that he was fighting with them was about the oral tradition. He was blaming them that they are following their traditions rather than the word of God. And so I always go to the story when he's in the desert and Satan is tempting him, and everything that Satan tells him, notice when he replies to Satan, he doesn't say, my understanding is, no, he's saying it is written that blah, blah, blah. And then again, it is written that, and then, so, and in my opinion, it's so important. That word is like, for me, that's a message from Yeshua. You have to pay attention to what is written, not to the understanding or interpretations of human beings.
Yeah, great point. Even Yahushua was pointing back to the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. And clearly, what's funny is that when the one time that, correct me, there might be more, but the one time that he told, this was a huge slap in their face in the Pharisees. He told the people, he said, listen to the Pharisees, everything they have to say when they're in the seat of Moses. And so he's describing when they actually go to the synagogue and they open up the Torah and they sit in the seat of Moses and they read it. And he's saying, look, when they're in the seat of Moses, listen to everything they have to say. And that's like an ouch. It's just like, slap in the face type of thing. So yeah, he clearly, Yahushua Messiah was, the reason he was criticizing them was for ultimately doing away with the law. And this is what I point to, that it's not, Judaism today has done away with Torah. Now, they will tell you, what? No, we've never done that. But they will tell you, if they're being honest, if you get into the inner circles, that there is no Torah apart from the Talmud, apart from their oral interpretations of it. You cannot interpret that. You can't read that aside from the interpretations. And so they have done away with Torah in order to keep to their traditions. And Christianity does the exact same thing. There's just this cognitive dissonance that like, I don't know. It's like, you look at biblical history, it never worked out well for anybody who did away with Torah in order to keep to their own traditions. It just never worked out well. And I don't know why so many people, they think it's okay to do it now. I don't get it, but.
Well, I mean, they are following the guy that was originally a Pharisee, and that's what he did. He did away with everything that Yeshua said.
Yeah. Anybody else have any thoughts?
my question is, like, really, what happened to the Levitical priesthood, though? It just seems to have just disappeared at some point in time. Like, the Levites were the priests, and then they just
Well,
disappeared. Next thing you know, you've got the Sanhedrin and the.
well, I don't understand. I mean, we still so there were. What happened was leading up to the Babylonian captivity, you had the house of Israel and the house of Judah. The northern kingdom was Israel, and those consisted of the 10 tribes, and then you had the 2 to 3 tribes that stuck with down in Judah. You had Yehudah, you had Benjamin, and Levi. And so Yahuah divorces the top 10 tribes, and he's done with them, and that's a whole nother story. And the 3 that remain are Benjamin, Levi, and Judah. So they go into captivity. They're the ones that come back. And so the Levitical priesthood is still there at the temple. This is, and now again, and now what happened to them today is a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different story. But if we're going by official history, then you have the Kohens, you have the the Levies, a lot of those around. I just spoke with a guy at my house just recently. He came down, he noticed I was wearing tassels, and he wanted to he was really insulted because I had the name of the Most High on my shirt, and he's like, "You're not supposed to do that," and he was trying to correct me. And I was like, well, where does it say I'm not supposed to do that? And he couldn't show me because he knows that I told him, I'm not going by any oral traditions. I only go by the written law. And he's like, really? He was like shocked. He was shocked that anybody would wear tassels and like just go by the written law. He'd never encountered that, but he claimed to be descended from the Levites. He was a Levi. So if they ever do get around to putting up a new temple, they have a Sanhedrin in place today.